Hello, good morning. I see we have quite a number of people already seated. Excellent. Hope that you had a very good sleep, not too jet lagged. Hope you enjoyed breakfast. While we have some more colleagues who are coming and joining, we are going to put a little video of yesterday. So we are going to see how yesterday went. And just asking colleagues who are coming if you can start taking your seats. We're going to start very, very soon. Thank you. Look at this video. So just as a reminder, please take your seats. It would be appreciated if you can sit on a table with people who speak your language. Because today, at some point, we're going to have some discussion at the table, and speaking the same language usually helps. Also, reminder, please take your headsets for the interpretation if you don't have them yet. Remember, we can have guests speaking in Portuguese, in Russian, in Spanish, in French. There we go. I think we are ready to start. Ready to start. We are full house again. I'm very happy to see so well rested faces, so refreshed faces. This is excellent. we have a very promising day today. So I am just, colleagues, we're doing very well so far, so thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are ready to start. We are going to start with a little bit of a recap. So for this, I'm going to invite Raquel, Tom. Tom is joining us. Tom is joining us, and Manita. We have Manita right also with us. She has been, I'm sure you all know her by now, because she has been centrally making sure that this happens. So over to Tom. Over to Manita. Excellent.
Thanks, Aroa. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see everyone. I hope everyone has their brain on because we're going to have a quiz. And whoever gets the questions wrong will have to come up here and do a dance or something like that. Okay? So for this one, can everyone have their mobile phone ready? This is the one session we'd love to have your mobile phone. So can I see everyone's mobile phone, please? We'll be using Mentimeter. Everyone has their phone? Thank you. Please give me a wave. I need to see that everyone has their phone ready. You can do this on your laptop, but it's easier on the phone. Wonderful. Thank you, thank you. Okay, who's ready? Are you ready to be tested? Thank you, David. Okay. So, if you can please scan the QR code on your phone, and when you've done that and you're on the Menti site, please hold your hand up so I can see it's all one. These guys are already winning. Are we competing in here? Because this will be good. I'm very competitive. So, everyone's got this? Wonderful. If you can't scan the QR code, there's a website there as well, and you just put in the code. Okay, first question. Please, on your screen, just touch your screen to show us the country where you are from. Where's home for you? One more? Okay. Okay, we're going to leave this up just for another minute. And please just put your hand up so I know it's working. Is anyone having problems? If you're having a problem, please put your hand up and one of our team will come and help you. Over there. Can one of the UNDP team please help that table over there? Instructions? Just scan. Scan the QR code. With your camera, open your camera and scan. Aroa, can you, just this table here. Yes, it should say instructions. If you're on this page, that's good. Okay. If you put your hand up and need help, Aroa and anyone in the UNDP team can come to you. A couple of tables over there. Okay, we might move to the next question. When you're connected, you can answer the questions as well. Okay. Oh, wow. So where is home for you? Just touch the screen where you are from or where you'd like to go. I know there's someone here from New Zealand because I'm from Australia, so there is a dot in that area as well. Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We'll move to the next question. Oh, look at that. How good is that? Oh, thanks. I see the thumbs up as well. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, guys, we'll just go to the next question. Who's ready? It's a really hard question. How are you feeling today? Please answer in your language if you'd like. We would prefer you use whatever language you're comfortable with and pop it into the field in Mentimeter. Great, awesome, happy, correct. Living the dream. Who said living the dream? This is... Anyone else? 57? Oh, awesome. I'm really, really happy. I don't know what correct means. I'm hoping that's not a negative thing. Wonderful. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, a bit of a technical question. Can everyone see? If you can see the screen, that's great. Otherwise, please look at your phone and please select one answer. So what does gender responsive finance lead to? And it's okay to say, I don't know. It means we have to work harder today. So the answers, the choices are reducing the gender pay gap, reducing gender-based discrimination, creating economic opportunities for women and men, all of the above, or I don't know. What does gender responsive finance lead to? Okay, well the answer is actually, I'll just wait for a couple more responses. So it's actually all of the above, okay? So if we do this really well, and if we do this in the way that we are talking about over the next 3 days or the next 2 days coming up, it will be all of the above. And those of you who have said, I don't know, please come and talk to one of us as well. And hopefully by the 3rd day, your response would change as well. But it is also the first 3 responses. Okay, next question. This is a good one. So please have a guess. We don't expect anyone to know this. Actually, I know there's 2 people on our table who definitely know this. If you had to guess what percentage of the ministers of finance around the world, the seats are held by women. 2%, 12%, 22%, or 41%? Someone likes this question. Okay, so the answer is actually 2%. It's 2%. And that's one of the reasons we're here all together. So maybe when we convene again in a couple of years, we'll be closer to that end. Yes? Okay. Okay. One word to describe what you thought of yesterday during the day. Please use one word, and again, in your language is completely fine. Interesting. Oh, so controversial, yes, amazing. Informative. Fast and furious, I like that one. Challenging. So a lot of people are saying challenging, interesting, and informative. Great. Illuminating. Eye-opening. Amazing. So good. Thank you, everyone. This is really, really great to know. Wonderful. And I think We might have 1 or 2 questions. Let me see. Are you ready for the next one? Okay, another technical one. So how can public finance systems be designed to create or achieve gender equal economies? So the first response you might want to pick is through gender responsive budgeting, by reducing bias in taxation, reducing taxes for all of the above, or only A and B are correct. Only one answer is correct. It's good to see that most of you are listening and learning. This is so good. It makes us feel really, means we're doing our job. Yes, so it's A and B is correct. A and B is correct. Thank you. Okay, this is my favorite question. So if you could have one superpower, what would it be? And because I can't do Menti, my superpower I'm just going to share with you is I would love to speak every language in the world, and I would also love to speed read so I can read all the books. Teleportation, to fly, jumper, see the future. There's 2 see the futures. Or there's quite a few see the futures. Eliminate all forms of discrimination. That's wonderful. Remove religion. Interesting. Perfect information. Okay, I don't think it's populating all of them, but we'll be able to see them soon. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think that is the end. Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Manita. That was great, and great to hear of your own desire for a superpower, Manita, to be able to speak every language in the world. Because, again, coming back to yesterday, I think we made progress. Remember, we sort of hit upon the linguistic barriers that we may face across the communities on public finance, tax, budgets, gender equality. I think we made some progress. I'm not saying we've overcome those linguistic barriers, but I think we've made progress. I think we may have built a bit more of a common understanding of what gender equality is, but also of what the interface between gender equality and different dimensions of public finance are. I still think we've got a way to go, but I think we have built some linguistic bridges, and we had amazing presentations and panels yesterday. I really, I, for one, learned a huge amount from those presentations and panels. So again, thanks to all that were involved in those. I think we've got maybe the emerging sort of framing of a common understanding of how gender equality and public finance relate to each other. I think we all agree, don't we, that gender equality as a lens forces us to look across tax, expenditures, debt came up yesterday quite significantly, as well as links to the macroeconomy and the fundamentals of the economy. Only if we understand the interlinkages across those can we accelerate gender equality in a meaningful way. We cannot look at one isolated from the other. I think we all agree that. But another important message that I took away from yesterday is that this is a win-win. That not only does public finance promote gender equality if we get it right, but a focus on gender equality can strengthen public finance. And I think that's the incentive we need if we're involved in tax reform or budget reform or debt management. If we can see that a focus on development outcomes, that the evidence that we can take from looking at development outcomes, if we can see the connections between gender equality and public financial management reform, we can accelerate public financial management reform. And let's face it, public financial management reform is slow. It's too slow. So by bringing some extra momentum, bringing other groups around the agenda of public finance reform, we may be able to accelerate it. The evidence that we gather certainly can strengthen public finance policy. The evidence we gather can strengthen the transparency and accountability of public finance systems. So I really want to emphasize the win-win nature of looking at gender equality and public finance. We even talked about how it's a win-win in terms of strengthening institutions, the social contract, trust in institutions, which we know at this time in our world is probably the lowest it has been for a long time. So there's a real rationale for focusing on gender equality and public finance. I think we heard a lot about different tools and instruments. I got a bit, I don't know what you're like, mentally I'm quite slow. I have to sort of put things in boxes to be able then to remember them. And we heard a lot of tools and instruments, particularly on the tax side, that we need to think about as a package. We heard a bit around the expenditure side, revisiting gender-responsive budgeting. Now, on the interface between tax and expenditure, I only heard about one tool, which I think Karen shared with us, the CEQ tool. I'd like us today to really try and look at the interface of tax and expenditure. What other tools do we have or do we need that could help us really build a better understanding of the interplay between tax, expenditure, and date for development outcomes and gender equality? We heard yesterday, towards the end, some really exciting examples of countries' own initiatives in these areas. And I can't emphasize enough that we know how hard it is to think of new tools, new approaches, to bring new ideas to already busy days that we're all engaged in. The number of reforms that we're undertaking, the number of capacity development initiatives, the pressure on us to do this or that. We know that everyone's lives are already busy. But the pathways that we heard yesterday from a few countries, we'll also hear again today from more countries of how actually they're bringing gender equality into their ongoing reforms, how they can strengthen their existing reforms through a focus on gender equality. And indeed, that really is the focus of today, as we move from building a common understanding yesterday, a common frame to look at the topic. Today, we're going to look more at country examples and pathways that you may want to take forward in strengthening a focus on gender equality and public finance. I also just wanted to say something about discomfort, because I noticed yesterday, and several people have come up to me also, that, feeling a bit uncomfortable about some of the discussion. Whether it's about an understanding of gender equality, or whether it's an understanding of, really, is it possible to look at expenditures and tax together? Is it possible to overburden a very tricky public finance management reform process with yet another agenda? And I think discomfort should be celebrated. Let's be uncomfortable. That's the whole point of bringing different communities together. If we're not uncomfortable, then we're not actually changing anything. So please feel uncomfortable in a comfortable way today, if you can, and continue to be frank and honest as we go through the process, because there's no point in hiding your discomfort. Share it with us, and let's see if we can overcome it together. So with that long and rambling summary of what I think happened yesterday, you may have experienced a completely different yesterday to me. I'm going to hand over now, I guess, to Raquel, is it? Everyone's pointing at everyone else. Karen. So, are you okay? Are you ready? Yeah, ready for action? Please. Oh, yes. No, no, no. Wait.
Please. Alors, that was French. Good morning, bonjour, bon dia, buenos dias, how do you say good morning in Turkish?
Morning.
Good night. Wow, that's loud. I hope everybody's ready for a good conversation. We're going to hear country experiences from Colombia, from Comoros, and we're going to hear from the international budget process. And I'm really excited about this panel. So we're going to make it interactive. Oh, are you supposed to talk first? I'm sorry. There's a presentation first by Aroa. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Karen. So it was going to be just a quick presentation. The purpose of it is to start thinking how we can conduct such reforms. So this is actually the purpose of today. Yesterday we were talking about what are the issues? Why is it important to consider gender equality and public finance interrelation? So today we're going to start thinking, okay, how do we do it? What can be the different pathways that we can take? So first I just want to start saying, to start being very humble. It's not that we have any solutions like Tom mentioned. There are different options that we can consider, but this just intends to be just a little bit of kind of structure on how we can think on the reforms that we may consider to conduct. So if we do I have the thingy? Thank you. So to start, it is important that we know where we want to go. Sometimes we can see that there has been some gender-responsive budgeting conducted or some other types of reforms without some clear objectives of what is our final goal of that. So as it was one gentleman mentioned yesterday from the audience asking, we need to understand first what generates gender inequalities and what is the source of discrimination. So there are gender experts that have been working on this for years, and we don't have the answer either, but we do have some hints, and we identify that gender social norms permeate everything, every aspect of human existence. We, the people, are the ones who create the institutions, are the ones who have created what fiscal policies look like. So it is understandable, and it is something that we can expect, that then we are reproducing our own biases on gender equality on the same fiscal policies we create on the institutions, taking things for granted like who is going to take care of the kids, who is expected to be the main breadwinner, who is expected to have higher salary, and so on. So once we have this understanding and analysis and we conduct them, then we need to say, okay, but what do we want? How does a gender equal economy look like? How does a gender equal society look like? We need to start building our objective. So where do we want to go? We know that there are the SDG, Sustainable Finance Goals. There are some of these objectives of where we want to go. We can have others. Governments, they do have their own objectives of where we want to go, but it is important, I think, that we have a clear direction. Then once we have it, and I'm aware that most of the countries that are sitting here, they do have their own strategies already on where they want to go on gender equality. Then thinking, okay, so how fiscal policies and how public finance is actually being influenced by these gender social norms, by these inequalities. So then we can start identifying the bottlenecks that are impeding us to reach to this gender equal economy that is impeding us to reach where we want to go.
And then, so then it is going to be on that moment where we can define, okay, so how can public finance fiscal policy work for gender equality? It is a process of envisioning, of understanding. But what I would like to present here is that we are not encouraging you to start a parallel new process, because I am aware, and I would love to hear from you what ongoing processes you already have, what ongoing policies you have on defining your gender equality objectives, on defining this roadmap. So what does it mean to integrate a gender equality lens in fiscal policy and tax reforms? It is applying this mindset throughout the processes that you are conducting. So it is not an ask to really start something new. It's like, my gosh, I'm already up to here with my work. Are you asking me to do something else? It is important that we that we integrate this gender lens. So this can be integrated through the work we have to do, through the work we are already doing and engaged in. Are we engaged on a fiscal reform? How can I integrate the gender equality lens there? Or am I conducting already some assessments? How can I put some questions on gender equality there? Just wanted also to bring what lots of colleagues said yesterday on the importance of making sure that we consider all the institutions that are relevant and that we would need to bring to the table. Definitely the Ministry of Finance, it is at the center. But we know that decisions on public finance are also are taken by Parliament, are implemented by tax administrations. We know how influential the central banks are, the monetary policies, how they influence. Also, all the budgeting decisions on the outcome, on the activities, on the outputs done by other ministries like Ministry of Economy, Trade, Ministry of Women, Ministry of Social Protection, of Planning. Also, it was mentioned yesterday, the role of the subnational governments. Like there was a question, can we consider some conditionalities to subnational governments? And also thinking that all these institutions that interrelate, they are not in isolation. They need to ensure an effective governance, engaging with civil society. They are part of a global community. So ensuring that we, all of them are at the table. Then these are some suggestions in case you find them helpful on what things should I consider, okay, I am going to start in my country a tax reform, and I want to consider a gender equality focus. What things should I need to take into account? What we could suggest is to start with aligning the policy objectives. So what are the gender equality objectives of your country? What are the development objectives? How do they match with the macroeconomic and fiscal objectives? So just ensuring that they speak to each other, looking at them, thinking how there could be coherence, and avoid sometimes that they could be, that they're not counterproductive. Also thinking, what do I need in my institution to conduct these gender equality reforms, or these reforms with the gender equality lens? Maybe I may need some expertise on gender equality. Maybe I may need to think how we configure internally our groups, our teams. This will be discussed this afternoon on thinking more on the public institutions, ministries of finance and tax authorities. Also, what data do I need? Maybe I don't know what the gender issues are because I don't have the data for it. Am I doing some data reform? Can I put there some indicator on gender equality that could be useful for my goals? And ensuring adequate governance. I think that we are seeing here on this global dialogue how useful, at least we feel that, how, and I think many of you have conveyed to us how useful it is to bring the different voices together. This is even more important when we want to ensure buy-in, when we want to ensure that everyone is on the table for these reforms, when we want consensus. So ensuring adequate governance. Do we have the chance to consult civil society representatives, women's organizations? Can we do that? Maybe we can get some ideas that we didn't know about. So making use also of all the wealth of knowledge that is already out there on gender equality can also help us. So this is how we are approaching it at UNDP. We call it economics. We are working through different programs, projects, like Tax for SDGs. We work a lot. There is also another program called PALOC that works on public financial management. Through all of them, we are trying to bring this vision together. So we understand that we need to bring together the reforms on governance and institutions so they are equipped and they are ready, together with looking at the revenue and expenditures, as we have been discussing. As Tom said, we don't have all the tools yet on how we can look at this together, but this is where we want to go. This is our direction. And all this is framed with what we call the INFFs. INFFs are the Integrated National Financing Frameworks. I'm sure that many of the countries that are seated here have had some sort of process or are starting the process. These frameworks are the ones that come from the Addis Ababa Action Agenda in 2015, and they are financing strategies to finance the SDGs, looking public-private finance, how we can redirect the funds towards the SDGs. So we see this very well interconnected. So I'm not going to go much more beyond this, but these are some suggestions on how you can consider to integrate gender equality lens through your existing reforms. So at the beginning, when you are thinking on your own institution, what do I need to get ready for the new policy reform that I'm conducting? Maybe thinking, okay, may I need to get some gender equality expertise? May I need to get some capacity development? Later in the afternoon, we will go more in depth on this institutional reform and how our experience says that can be conducted in an effective way. So once the institution is ready, then and you are engaged on negotiations, on identifying the reforms, who else can you bring to the table? So what stakeholders are relevant to ensure that you bring in the gender equality lens? Also, do you have ongoing cross-thematic groups? Maybe you have created some tables, expert tables. Can we bring some gender expertise there? Maybe you can think how you can use them to bring this gender lens. Maybe you are conducting already some diagnostics and research you conducted maybe before, maybe during, and were you able to integrate these gender equality considerations there? Always having in mind, and I would like to emphasize, having your objective, what do you want to achieve on gender equality? So it's not just integrating gender per se, but you have your goal in front of you. And then you can move to implement, also thinking how you make it operational, always remembering how do I operationalize it, considering this gender equality considerations. Again, very important, constant capacity development, constant ensuring that constantly you have the gender equality expertise whenever is needed, that you have it in your institution if possible. And linking the action plan with existing, action plan or whatever reform plan you have, linking it with existing processes. So maybe the Ministry of Women, they already also have some process that you can build synergies with. Or maybe there are other departments that already have some ongoing processes, some ongoing plans that they are implementing that you can build synergies. And then lastly, monitoring accountability and impact. Here is where it comes again, building data and understanding. So what is the impact? This is something that we usually miss. So we see that gender responsive budgeting usually stops at the moment of distributing the resources. Like Karen was saying and Diane yesterday, it is important not to stop there, think and see what happens with those investments. So this is something that usually is missing. What impact are we having? Do we need to change the way that we do the gender responsive budgeting or integrating also the revenue side? So I'm not going to go through all of them. I leave it to panelists to discuss. So then I just want to leave this open question here for all of you, and just trying to spark some thinking on what existing reform processes you have, or what entry points you are seeing that maybe you say, maybe here I could integrate some analysis. Maybe here could be an opportunity to maybe think what data I need. Or maybe I could just use this policy dialogue I'm having just to bring also some further civil society, women's organizations to open a discussion and think how we can move and integrate gender equality there. So just, I feel I'm leaving you with more questions than answers, but I think that this is also the purpose, to spark discussion, but then I leave it to the panel. So thank you. Karen.
Thank you so much, Aroa. I think let's now turn to the panel because we're going to have some real-world examples. Reform processes are often messier in practice than they are when we present guideposts, and I think it'll be interesting to hear our country experiences. So let me start with you, Luis Carlos. In 2022, Colombia went through a series of fiscal reforms. It would be interesting if you can tell us which reforms you thought were the ones that were important for promoting gender equality. What systems did you set up in place to track that? Did you have to collect new data? What did you do?
Right. First of all, we were convinced that implementing a progressive tax reform was a key way to move our policies towards something that was more equitable in terms of the treatment of women, right? So we were coming from a situation in which over the course of many years, the rate of taxation on capital had been diminishing, echoing the trends in public policy for many years based off of these results from the 1980s, that the optimal rate of taxation on capital was as close to zero as you could possibly get. And we set out to reverse that for a number of reasons, but primarily because of the equity considerations, gender and otherwise. So first and foremost, as opposed to what had happened before us, we stopped insisting on increasing VAT rates on basic goods and services, which again promotes equity broadly speaking. We set out to remove tax benefits on corporations that tended to be regressive, right? In particular because they benefited the largest firms, which also tend not to be owned by women, and in general, these benefits tend to be regressive overall. So we set out to remove that, and I guess finally, the inevitable thing is that some of the goals that we had basically showed that there are always trade-offs, right? One point that was important for many people who worked in this tax reform was the introduction of so-called health taxes, or taxes for that promote healthy behaviors, right? So taxes on sugary drinks and ultra-processed foods, which do promote healthier behaviors, but also target goods that are consumed by, generally speaking, lower income people, and also which make up a larger share of, or rather that have an incidence that targets primarily low-income people, including women. So I guess what this goes to show is that a lot of what we did was try to implement progressive tax reform in the knowledge that this, generally speaking, favors various groups, including women. But in particular, regarding the gender impact of our policies, I think something that was key was that we introduced a gender box, a gender identifier in tax returns as mandated by law, and we mandated the tax administration to start conducting studies using this information. And what we have found, I think is interesting and will probably lead to policies that are better informed in the future.
That sounds really very curious about what kind of reactions you had by, I'm assuming you raised the rates on income from corporate income. What kind of resistance did you have to go through? What kind of reaction did you have? Often the issue is that capital flight, corporations will leave. Can you say a little bit more about how you got that reform through?
Well, yeah, that's usually the objection that you do get. We didn't, so interestingly, we didn't increase the nominal rates. We just reduced the tax benefits. But the effect is probably very similar to that. You get the usual responses. This threat that firms will leave en masse, and they're still there. So fortunately that didn't happen. And I think one key point is that the exchange of information with other tax administrations has certainly reduced that risk. We see it in the information that we have now. For instance, one thing that we resisted was the urge to give yet another tax amnesty, and when we look at the data, it probably wouldn't have been worth it. So the usual discourse, but I think we did well to sort of not pay too much attention to it.
And one final question to you before I turn to Monsieur Jaffar. How did you think, beyond the fact that doing these reforms, which I fully agree are in the interest of gender equality and will benefit women, did you have any pressure to think about using the tax system in any other way to promote gender equality?
Well, there was certainly an important constituency that pushed for gender sensitivity in what we're doing, and I think an interesting trade-off we faced there was that there was a request for tax benefits for women who hired care. So a businesswoman who hires a nanny, some people felt it would be important to have that be a deductible expense, and it was interesting to think through that, because on the one hand you can see how it makes sense. On the other hand, if you're at a position where you can hire help, you're probably very high up in the income distribution. So how exactly do you deal with that? And that's one of the things that we hope that the new data that we're getting will help us answer.
I think that's a really important point that you just made, because there are many women who might not actually be part of the tax, poor women in particular, who may not pay taxes and would not get, who actually may be the people who are working for the higher income women. So it's important to think about trade-offs. Okay, Monsieur Jaffar, I would also like to ask you the question. Comoros is a very interesting country. You've started on the process of fiscal reform. How are you putting your gender lens into this reform? What are the specific things that you're aiming at? And how are you bringing in the various constituencies to help you there?
Madame la modératrice, honorable assistance, en vos titres rend grade tout protocole observé. Mesdames et messieurs, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier le PNUD de m'avoir invité à ce grand forum sur la fiscalité et le genre. C'est une très belle opportunité, une très bonne occasion pour venir exprimer un peu ce qui se passe dans mon pays, les Comores. Je voudrais tout d'abord, si vous me permettez, parce que je sais que beaucoup parmi vous ne savent pas où se trouvent les Comores, c'est juste pour vous dire que les Comores, c'est un petit pays insulaire de moins d'1 million d'habitants, situé à l'entrée du canal nord de Mozambique, une superficie totale de 1862 km². C'est pour vous dire que c'est vraiment un petit pays, très pauvre parmi les pays pauvres du monde. C'est un pays où l'économie est très difficile. C'est un pays où on ne vit que sur les importations. Autrement dit, tout est importé, du sucre, du riz, l'huile, du lait, ainsi de suite. Notre économie repose sur l'agriculture, la pêche et parfois sur le tourisme. C'est pour vous dire que nous avons uniquement quelques produits de rente que nous exportons. C'est la vanille, c'est le girofle, c'est l'ilang. C'est pour vous dire que c'est un pays très très difficile en matière de vie. Parmi ceux qui sont victimes, très sincèrement, ce sont les femmes. Donc, avec l'arrivée du président, de son Excellence, le président Azali Assoumani au pouvoir, il a décidé de mettre la femme en avant. C'est pour dire qu'avant, la situation aux Comores, les femmes, je ne voudrais pas dire qu'elles n'existaient pas, mais la femme n'était pas au cœur des affaires de l'État. À un moment donné, il y avait des familles qui étaient découragées d'envoyer leurs enfants en filles à l'école parce qu'à un moment donné, il n'y a pas de place pour les femmes. Donc, le président Azali, quand il est arrivé au pouvoir, pour mettre en place, pour mettre en valeur la femme, il a commencé à placer des femmes au cœur du système. C'est à partir de là, pour la première fois, on a eu une femme ministre de la Santé, on a eu une femme directrice dans une société, des femmes dans les départements ministériels. C'est pour vous dire qu'on a commencé à avancer. Et puis, quand il est revenu au pouvoir, il a encore accéléré. En résumé, je dois vous dire qu'actuellement, nous avons des femmes gouverneurs, nous avons des femmes ministres, nous avons, excusez-moi, nous avons des femmes directrices générales. Par exemple, maintenant, au niveau de la Direction générale des impôts, j'ai une femme qui est directrice régionale. Au niveau de la Direction générale du budget, c'est une femme. Au niveau de la Direction du contrôle financier, c'est une femme. Au niveau du secrétariat général du ministère des Finances, c'est une femme. C'est pour vous dire que ça avance. Donc, nous estimons que pour arriver à une égalité femme-homme, il faut que la femme soit là. Il faut qu'elle s'instruise. Il faut qu'on lui donne les moyens de s'instruire pour pouvoir assister aux grandes décisions de l'État. Donc, c'était juste un bref aperçu pour vous montrer l'importance de mon pays. La question qui a été posée, quels sont les points d'entrée envisagés pour l'implémentation d'une politique fiscale sensible au genre? Je dois préciser dans un premier temps, non seulement que nous vivons avec l'agriculture, la pêche, mais aussi ce qui fait l'effort de notre économie, c'est notre diaspora. Sur une population comorienne de moins d'1 million d'habitants, la diaspora comorienne qui réside en France, c'est à peu près 200 000. Donc, c'était pour un aperçu général, mais aussi notre économie, c'est une grande partie dans le secteur informel. Des fois, on voit des femmes qui travaillent beaucoup, qui souffrent beaucoup. Et je dois vous dire aussi que chez moi, c'est un pays un peu compliqué parce que la femme, pourquoi je dis qu'elle souffre, c'est que vous pouvez, avec le système de polygamie, un mari peut avoir 3 femmes. Et là où le mari va passer la soirée, c'est la femme qui prend en charge. La femme, c'est elle qui s'occupe des enfants, de la scolarisation des enfants, c'est elle qui s'occupe d'autres charges, alors qu'au point de vue économique et fiscal, elle souffre beaucoup. Donc, moi, personnellement, par rapport à ce que vous avez posé comme question, vous allez me permettre, parce que j'ai énuméré un certain nombre d'éléments, pour que vous puissiez comprendre exactement là où nous voulons arriver. Donc, l'Union de Comores, actuellement, se positionne à l'avant-garde du changement. Autrement dit, l'Union de Comores prête à remodeler son paysage économique et social par l'intégration d'une dimension de genre dans sa politique fiscale. Cette initiative, elle est très ambitieuse, mais elle vise certainement à catalyser le soutien à l'entrepreneuriat féminin, à inaugurer une ère de modernisation au sein de la Direction générale des impôts pour un avenir plus inclusif et équitable. J'ai 2 points à évoquer ici. Le premier point, c'est sur la fiscalité et le genre en Union des Comores, un modèle d'avancée régionale parce que nous sommes dans l'océan Indien. Et puis un deuxième point, c'est sur le fondement du changement dans les mutations de nos sociétés et des échanges humains, commerciaux et économiques.
Thank you so
Je voudrais, si vous me permettez, madame, parce qu'il y a des points que je dois soulever ici. Autrement dit, nous avons des pionniers de l'inclusion. Qu'est-ce que je vais dire par là? Il y a 5 points. Il y a le premier sur le leadership de la femme au sein de l'administration fiscale dans mon pays. Il y a l'égalité dans l'allocation des orientations budgétaires sensibles au genre dans nos lois de finances. Il y a l'accélérateur d'entreprises féminines à travers des incitations fiscales innovantes. Il y a la diaspora en action. Et puis, nous, pour nous inspirer, il faut un benchmarking et adaptation locale. Donc, pour pouvoir aller vers ce débat, pour finir, j'ai quelques questions que je vais présenter à l'assistance pour nous pouvoir d'entrer dans le vif du sujet. Ma question, quelle incitation fiscale spécifique pouvons-nous développer pour encourager l'entrepreneuriat féminin? Comment une direction générale des impôts peut-elle renforcer sa structure et sa culture organisationnelle pour promouvoir l'égalité de genre et augmenter la représentation féminine dans des postes de leadership et décisionnels? De quelle manière pouvons-nous adapter notre orientation budgétaire pour refléter et promouvoir une sensibilité accrue au genre? Quelle stratégie efficace pouvons-nous mettre en place pour intégrer un soutien? Donc voilà d'une façon générale ce que je voulais faire comme introduction avant de passer au vif du sujet. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for this. I think, let's give you a round of applause. There's many good things that I'm sure people will want to hear more about in terms of your plans for modernizing the tax administration. It's very difficult, I think, in a largely agrarian economy to raise taxes. So I think people will be very interested in thinking about how you're moving away from informal taxation. Certainly improving women's entrepreneurship to enable them to become taxpayers, assuming they have the type of jobs that will enable them to pay, will be beneficial. But I think there's probably some other issues that you are considering that we may want to hear about later. Let me turn now to you, Maria. She's a member of the International Budget Project, and I think it used to be called the International Budget Project. Now it's called the International Budget Partnership. I had the great pleasure of seeing them in South Africa, and they're doing some amazing things at the local level as well as the international level. You do both technical work as well as advocacy. I'm interested in, and you've been doing this for a long time, where have you come? What are some of the lessons learned in making fiscal policy more responsive reducing inequality, but more responsive as well to the needs of women and men.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today. Hopefully I will be able to have enough time. It feels telling as not only as a minority on this panel, but a minority in this room in the sense that we're one of the very few civil society groups here, despite being name-checked maybe 30, 40 times yesterday. I actually had a whole other thing around in my notes, but I really want to highlight something in the Colombian intervention around what does it take. I think there's this idea that gender is treated as this extra thing that you have to do. You don't, right? In the policies that were talked about, okay, the differential taxation of labor and capital, how is that gender sensitive? Well, women don't accumulate capital in the same way as men do. So if you start taxing capital, at the same rate as labor, you actually end up with gender sensitive tax policy. The same thing with tax benefits to corporations. People who own corporations tend to be men, right? And it's not like, oh, where are the women? It's just, or you're not looking for women, you see actually how do these policies fall on people and who are those people. So it's not this big separate thing, it's just, and I'll come to my big point, we keep talking about data, and the point that we wanna make is that you cannot see what you do not count, right? That's the whole point. And generally, that kind of gender disaggregated data is often the remit of statistical agencies, when really it should be in-house within the PFM agencies. That is the real ask we're talking about. And why do we want this? And it's, again, something that was mentioned a bunch of times yesterday, which is impact, incidence analysis. So one of the key lessons is we need to know about the impact of our fiscal policies on both men and women or non-binary people or what have you. On the revenue side, we don't broadly produce tax incidence analyses that look at how different taxes impact men and women differently. And certainly when we do, it's an ad hoc process. It's not part of the tax policy design. And one of the things is moving beyond allocations, right? So we want to look at budget credibility. Right? It's a big one. There's a SDG indicator on this, 16.6.1. And while it measures deviations in central budgets, it doesn't look at deviations by sector. And this is where IBP's budget credibility work comes in. We have this study on 7 sectors on 10 global goals in 13 countries. And we found that water, sanitation, gender, and the environment had the lowest rates of budget execution. These were underspent by 18, 15, and 13% respectively. And of course, these are also the sectors that received on average the smallest share of total government expenditures from 2018 to 2020. And so, their gender isn't there, but when you look at who is impacted by these cuts, it's mostly women. So, our big ask is also close the feedback loop. Work with beneficiary communities and constituencies. On the tax side, we're working at the state level with, I think those partners are actually in the room, to look at gendered aspects of multiple taxation and to produce tax incidence analyses for women in those states. On our Spark program, which is what you saw in South Africa, we're working directly with constituency groups with multiple intersecting identities across 5 countries, including, in some cases, mostly women's groups, to better engage with not only the allocations for them, but to monitor the execution and oversight over those allocations. We use tools such as social audit process, community scorecards, and strategic accompaniment with service providers to identify those bottlenecks and to connect them to decision-making spaces to co-create solutions. And the last ask is transparency. You cannot monitor your budget execution if you don't produce in-year, mid-year reports, or if audit reports are coming in late or are not publicly available. You can, look up your country's performance on the Open Budget Survey. We know that these are the documents that often go missing. So that's my intervention. Sorry for going over time.
You weren't over time. This was great. I'm interested in hearing you give us some concrete examples of where the work you have done has been taken up in a tax administration? Or, and we'll come to the budgeting later, but where have you actually pointed out in the data that you've collected or in the work that you've done, you have a good partnership with the tax administration? Can you give us a country example?
So this is, our tax work is still relatively new. We are the newest program at IBP, but I can shout out our revenue authorities that are in the room. I think Kaduna is in the room as well, from Nigeria, where we are documenting market women and the fees that they pay. I mean, there's this idea that the informal sector doesn't get taxed, and we're working directly with state-level revenue authorities to say, no, look, here are all the fees that are being paid. And so when you come to enforce taxes, this is what you must know. And so how does that change the design of not only the taxes that you want to levy in terms of the presumptive tax regime, but how do you design enforcement policies for this population? Because as we know, as from yesterday, taxing the informal sector is like the shiny thing du jour, right, among tax administrations.
Thanks, that's really important. And we have others here from, as Priya talked about yesterday, from the International Center for Taxation and Development. There's lots of other things that we can do, and I'm assuming you're doing some tax literacy among market women as well. So let me come back to you in Colombia and the issue of data. I have two questions. What kind of data do you think, now that you're in the revenue, you were an academic before, you worked on data a lot, and I'm assuming in your previous life you thought about gender data. What data is important for a tax administration to collect and use? Do you do that through a process of just digitalizing and thinking through a modern administration in terms of things like e-filing and so forth, where you can collect information differently? And then what are you doing on the transparency side in terms of publishing what you're doing?
Yeah, great questions. One was it Groucho Marx who said that the risk of making good recommendations is that they may put you in charge of implementing them, right? And that's what I found to be the case. We advocated, when I was in academia, we advocated for data transparency from the tax administration, and actually on budget issues as well, where international budget partnership was such an important resource for what we were doing. What I have found in this commissioner of the tax administration is that we have such a wealth of data, right? I think sometimes in academia, researchers tend to actually underestimate the amount of information that tax administrations have, because third-party information that is reported to tax administrations basically just gives us so much data, right? And so you would think, well, I want to run those regressions away, right? And the first thing that you find is a very concrete problem of having these data silos, right? Just putting them together is a non-trivial task, and then that's where we're currently at. There's these legacy formats that are hard to analyze, and then, as I said, putting them together with other databases to then perhaps merge them with other administrative databases from other tax agencies is something that all tax administrations have to deal with, both in developed and developing countries. So internally, there's that, just putting all the information in a way that can be analyzed for gender-focused analysis, or actually any other type of focus. That's complicated. On the transparency side, there's the privacy issues that we have to comply with, and the trend towards transparency is somewhat hampered by the fact that there are more and more security concerns these days. So, for example, in the United States, the IRS has historically put out these anonymized data sets, and they've actually, stopped doing it because of new security concerns. I guess for better or worse, we were able to put into law that we had to release these anonymized data sets, and so we now kind of have to comply with that regardless. But I guess there we're in the same place as other tax administrations, balancing the trade-off between safety and transparency.
That's really an important issue that many governments, I think, are really grappling with. How do you balance the trade-off between privacy and security, as well as having transparency of information? And I think the fear is even greater now with AI technologies that you're thinking about. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that transparency is really critical. And it's critical for building trust in the system of what you do. So we have to keep that first and foremost. What do you collect in terms of either sex of the individual taxpayer in your personal income taxes, or how do you think on the corporate side or the business side? What information do you need that helps you distinguish, for instance, a female-owned firm from a male-owned firm, if you're thinking about income from business taxes?
Right. So we started collecting information on the gender of personal income tax filers. So we have male, female, non-binary. Those are the options that we give. There was a long discussion as to exactly how many choices and what, and we thought that was a good first approach. In as much as basically. The entire population of interest will file income taxes. Presumably, we can match that with, say, the legal representatives of firms, and so that's a good start. Yeah.
I'm sure people want to ask you more questions about the process of doing that.
I should probably mention, because this is something that not all countries have, but because we have. Electronic invoicing that is matched to national IDs. This is also something, so consumption patterns we could potentially match with the gender information that we're collecting. And so when it comes to VAT of various goods that obviously have, can be very conducive to a gender-based analysis, that's a potential that's there in the data too.
It's really important that you mention that having an identification a national identification number is really critical, but being able to match that with the information that you get through the tax administration, the interoperability of these systems, linking them is really, really critical, as you suggest. So flagging that for the future. Monsieur Jaffar, I'm going to ask you a tough question. And I would love you to give us a vision for how you think of developing the modern, that you referenced, the modern tax system in Comoros. Is it digitalizing your system? How do you think about moving forward? What's your specific reform agenda?
Très bien, c'est une question très importante, très intéressante. Je dois vous dire, comme je l'avais dit tout à l'heure, l'égalité hommes-femmes chez nous, ça devient vraiment un élément très indispensable. Je voudrais dire que la loi de finances 2024 a inscrit cette parité, cette égalité. Et je dois dire aussi que au niveau de la fonction publique, si les fonctionnaires sont 30 000, mais là, les femmes ne représentent même pas le un tiers. Donc maintenant, il faut faire en sorte que beaucoup plus de femmes puissent être dans les administrations publiques, même au niveau même des sociétés d'État aussi. Ça aussi, ça va permettre à tout le monde de pouvoir payer l'impôt général sur le revenu qui est chez nous une retenue à la source à partir du salaire. Je dois dire aussi que nous avons mis en place une direction de genre spécialement consacrée sur tout ce qui est réforme au niveau de la femme, mais aussi tendant vers une fiscalité juste, équitable entre hommes et femmes. Je dois dire aussi que actuellement, nous sommes en train de mettre en place beaucoup de systèmes. Par exemple, au niveau des activités à l'intérieur de notre pays, les femmes font beaucoup d'activités qui ne sont pas taxables. Donc, ce sont des structures qui rentrent dans le cadre informel. Nous sommes en train de réorganiser. Et enfin, c'est pour vous dire que là où nous allons mettre beaucoup nos moyens, c'est sur notre diaspora. Canaliser les investissements de cette diaspora vers des initiatives favorables au genre. Donc, nous avons beaucoup d'éléments, mais le temps est tellement court, mais c'est pour vous dire que notre objectif premier, c'est d'arriver à restructurer, à réorganiser, faire en sorte que cette parité-là, cette égalité-là, ce que l'homme va payer, c'est ce que la femme va payer. Mais aussi, pour finir, nous avons des incitations. Nous voulons inciter les femmes à entrer dans les activités génératrices de revenus. On va donner des crédits, on va donner des exonérations, on va faire beaucoup de choses pour permettre aux femmes d'évoluer.
Exemptions are an interesting road to go down. They have some peril. This is something you might want to think about and have more discussion about as you go forward, and think about ways of raising tax revenues without going down the route of too many exemptions going forward. But let me ask you how you're thinking about the data collection. Luis Carlos mentioned data is really important. What systems of data, how do you collect data on your taxpayer base right now? And what are you thinking of doing in the future?
Non, je disais tout à l'heure que nous voulons faire des incitations. Aujourd'hui, il faut pousser la femme à s'immatriculer. Nous avons mis en place un système de numéros d'identification. Il y a les numéros d'identification fiscale, il y a les numéros d'identification personnelle. Donc aujourd'hui, ceux qui engagent des activités génératrices de revenus vont devoir faire un NIF, un numéro d'identification fiscale. Pour nous, les incitations, aujourd'hui, il faut pousser à immatriculer. Si vous vous immatriculez pendant 2 ans, vous pouvez bénéficier des exonérations. Vous pouvez ne pas être taxable, mais uniquement pour 2 ans. C'est pour permettre d'avoir un fichier unique pour tout le monde. Et en plus, avant, on n'avait pas, disons, les données d'une façon générale. Mais maintenant, la douane et les impôts, le fichier est unique. Tout le monde passe par le même canal. Donc, c'est là où je dis qu'avec le numéro d'identification fiscale, parce que nous avons mis en place beaucoup de projets qui sont appuyés par le PNUD, par la Banque mondiale, par le Fonds monétaire, par la Banque africaine de développement, c'est pour pouvoir réorganiser et restructurer, étant donné que beaucoup de difficultés existaient avant, mais que, espérons que d'ici les années à venir, nous allons pouvoir entrer dans la... Voilà.
I think that's a great start. In research that has been done, one activity that's been found is registration on its own, even with an exemption, may not be fully successful. So there have been some interesting experiments where to register, for instance, enterprises, female-owned small businesses, micro businesses, at the same time of having them open bank accounts. So the issue of financial formalization is linked also to the registration of the business and trying to simplify the transactions and so forth. So there's been some interesting work done on the link between other services to wrap around the registration processes that will help women-owned firms. So I don't know if you've thought about that, but that is something that has been done in countries like Togo and Benin, for instance. So I'm going to open it up to the audience, but let me just do one last question. Let's go back to budgeting, which is where you guys have a lot of expertise. Diane yesterday mentioned gender responsive budgets is half full versus half empty. And she has, and Leica and others have talked about maybe good on the front end, but less good on the back end. What have you learned about the back end in terms of audits, tracking outcomes, those kinds of things that you would recommend to this audience?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of the last point that I was rushing to get out, is that this question of outcomes is where I think we're very stuck. I think that's where the rubber hits the road. You know, when you're saying, okay, we had these gender-sensitive allocations, but what did that actually mean for gender equality? And again, this is where I really commend the Colombian approach, where if you're just looking at progressive spending, right, progressive revenues, so revenues progressively raised, progressively spent, budget execution, good budget credibility, you know, in-year reports, mid-year reporting, timely audits. These are tools that can help you figure out where you are going. This question of where do you want to go, as posed by Aroa. And, you know, on the tax side, good budget credibility can give you a pointing direction towards good revenue credibility. You know, what is your revenue performance? What are your revenue goals? What are you missing? How is that impacting how budgets then get financed, right? Then you have that whole of fiscal systems approach that we've been talking about. I mean, we're also starting to work on debt and debt accountability for this thing that we're talking about, where, okay, if you're like really looking at the whole system, where are the weaknesses? But it really has to start with credibility work. And you are the agencies responsible for that. So that would be my big push for that.
Let's take some questions from the audience for our panelists here. I'd like to see a show of hands, and we'll go around the room. The morning wake up, we need more coffee. Yes, I'm going to take a question over there, and then we'll come this way. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question is for Colombia. You mentioned about making the process legally mandatory, whether it is gender budgeting or applying gender lens in tax side. So do you suggest that as a good practice for other countries? Because when you take the things legally mandatory, that's ensuring things. But fiscal mandate is not working well.
Right. So, I mean, I think it was definitely useful to make it legally mandated to collect data on gender in our income tax returns, and also to legally mandate, even if broadly, still to have it legally mandated for the tax administration to conduct research on gender and taxation issues. I think that, even though we were the ones who put this into the law, it gives us the weight of the law for continuing to do that in the face of, institutional inertia to not do it. So I do think this is good, and I do think it's worth considering in other countries, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions from this side of the room? Yes. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Rosalind from Seychelles. My question is to Colombia. Like, if you were to go back and redesign the policy reform what would you have done differently, like based on the lesson learned so far?
That's a good question. I think we were fairly clear on what we wanted in terms of an ideal policy. I think in retrospect, it's really the political considerations that we would have taken differently. I think we could have gone further in the direction that we wanted. I wish we had used the political momentum better, and I think that's worth considering for anyone who is conducting tax reform or actually just pushing anything through the legislature, right? Coming from academia, I think we believe that designing ideal policies is the key thing to do, and then that maybe policymakers, legislatures will take care of the details, but those details are really important. And so when you have an ideal policy and you want to make it into law, I think it's better if you if you take into account the political situation and you shepherd the policy through every single stage, and you make sure that you have to that at least the bigger part of what you want to do gets done. So take into account the political situation and make the most of it. That's what I would try to do differently.
I'm going to go this way and then to this part of the room. Are there some hands that I can call on when we come to next? I know there's one over there. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I'm Rania. I am the gender team leader in UNDP for the Regional Bureau of Arab States. My question is also for Colombia. You mentioned, if I understood correctly, that it's about the data and that you have digital IDs and that enabled you to match somehow with consumption patterns. So if you can just elaborate on that, I didn't quite get, and it sounds very interesting. Thank you.
Before you respond, let me get one more question.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take your question, the question in the back, and then I can put that in.
Hello. Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentations. I have one question for Comoros, and is, with these plans that you have and, this important commitment towards really looking at what's happening in terms of gender inequalities within the tax system and policies, what are the challenges you expect you're going to be facing in terms of the people that deliver tax services, the people that designed and implement those services? And also to the colleague from the International Budget Partnership, I would like to know if there's a case of a country that has really set formal or permanent institutional accountability mechanisms towards women's rights organizations, feminist organizations, to really be accountable on what are they doing for advancing gender equality in budgeting, for example? Thank you.
And in the back over there. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Esther from Kenya. Mine goes to Colombia, and I think one of the key challenges that we have faced in Kenya is the trade-off between privacy and data privacy and security. Although our Kenyan laws allows the Revenue Authority to obtain data, we are faced with a challenge of data privacy laws. So I would be keen to hear how you've managed to maneuver through legally on the issues of data privacy, especially in the informal sector. We are looking for a linkage between the revenue authorities and the telcos, but I think one of the key challenges we have faced is the data privacy issues. So maybe if you can share a bit more on how you've been able to deal with that. On the issue of electronic invoicing, again, this is an area that Kenya is trying to explore. What we have seen is that electronic invoicing would help us on the B2B transactions. However, the B2C transactions still remain a huge challenge. So maybe if you can talk more on what you've done on the B2C transactions. How are you enforcing compliance on this sector? Because I think for us there is lack of visibility, especially in the informal sector, people who trade in cash on the B2C transactions. I think this would really significantly help Kenya in dealing with the informal sector.
Such an important question. Thank you for asking that, Diane. And then we'll come back to the panel.
Diane Elson, thank you for a really fascinating panel. And if I had half an hour, I've got lots of questions for all three of you. But I'll confine myself to one again for Colombia, for Luis and Colombia. You raised, among the very many interesting points you raised, the problem of the trade-offs between raising taxes on things we want to discourage people from consuming because it's bad for their health, and the fact that this by itself will have a regressive effect. It will impact more heavily on the incomes of poor families than of rich ones. And I wondered if you'd thought of any policies to offset that regressive effect by, for instance, using the extra tax revenue that you get to fund free school lunches with nutritious food. Because I think this is a practical example of what we were talking about yesterday, about linking the revenue and the expenditure side. There are ways of doing that, but I think one way is always to think when we've got a tax that we want for very good reasons, but it's going to have some regressive impacts, can we do something to offset that by having a progressive policy on the expenditure side? So did you think about funding free school lunches, especially in low-income areas?
Okay, let's turn back to our panel. I'm going to ask you, Faria, to start in terms of the question directed to you, and then we'll go to Monsieur Jafar, and then we'll come back to you, Luis.
So thank you. I mean, the question on accountability is a broad one, but maybe this question about audit institutions. There's a lot of great work being done by Intosai on helping governments track, and this will be the key thing, formal commitments to gender equality. But, you know, engaging women's rights movements or civil society, again, generally with participation and engagement, governments are very good on the formulation phase, and then the remaining three phases, you know, approval, execution, oversight, you have, you know, the graph goes like this. And so on the audit, there is very little engagement. Though if there's one government or one audit institution that's starting to really pioneer in that sense, I'd say the Gambia. So, a short answer.
One thing I think we forget about here is thinking about third-party auditors. I think the big accounting firms, which do a lot of public sector auditing, need to be brought into this kind of conversation. Over to you, Monsieur Jafar, to answer the question from our colleague over here.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Je voudrais dire que les Comores reviennent de très loin. Comme je l'avais dit tout à l'heure, hein, sur l'audit des institutions. Je ne veux pas être long sur mon intervention là-dessus. Seulement, c'est pour vous dire que nous avons décidé de travailler avec le secteur privé. Donc, le dialogue public-privé, nous estimons que ça va nous permettre d'avancer rapidement. C'est vrai qu'il nous manque beaucoup de moyens, mais aussi nous nous sommes fixés comme un objectif avoir un agenda précis, avoir des objectifs précis. Nous nous sommes fixés un calendrier jusqu'en 2026-27 pour que nous puissions voir d'une façon générale là où on cloche, là où on bute, là où on doit faire avancer. Mais la réalité, c'est une question de moyens chez nous. Donc pour le suivi, pour le traitement, pour beaucoup de choses. Donc la dernière fois, il y a un dialogue PPP, public-privé, qui a été initié, qui nous a permis de mettre en place des institutions qui vont nous permettre d'avancer rapidement, mais avec des objectifs précis. Et puis, pour finir, c'est que là, nous nous sommes dit que chaque année, il faut une évaluation pour aller vite vers cette égalité homme-femme.
Thank you. Okay, Luis, the floor is yours. Maybe you can start with the B2C question. Backward.
Sure. And regarding how to improve the implementation of electronic invoicing when it comes to business to consumer electronic invoicing, I wish we had the answer. We're still working on it. I suspect we face similar challenges. We currently have mandated electronic invoicing only for transactions above a certain value. Starting this year, it will be for every single transaction. But even for those transactions of a higher value, we've had issues. One thing that we've started doing is using the tools that we have to enforce compliance, which are basically sanctions to sellers that don't comply, and some of them have been fairly well publicized by the media. I think the fact that we have not hesitated to close, these are temporary closings for up to 3 days. Major supermarkets like national chain stores, it has brought a lot of publicity, and it's certainly become part of the public conversation. I think it remains to be seen how successful we are in actually going beyond the publicity that this involves. So we're kind of in the same place, but we think this may help. Regarding national IDs and consumption patterns, so for electronic invoicing, you essentially give, as a consumer, your national ID to the seller to record the transaction. This is something that, depending on the country, could be very counterintuitive. I doubt anyone, say, in the United States would be happy to give their social security number to a supermarket for a transaction, but it's fairly uncontroversial in Colombia. So as long as you have that ID, you can match it to gender information and other information, and potentially conduct this analysis. The issue of how different government agencies exchange information, I suppose it becomes easier or harder depending on the legislation in each country. In Colombia, we don't have much of an issue exchanging information with other government agencies. It's mostly when it comes to giving this private information to actors outside of the government, so say to academia, and the way we've worked around that is having our academic partners work with research assistants that are hired by the tax administration, and so far that seems to be working. And then finally, regarding the trade-offs of things like the health taxes and the progressivity of those measures. Yes, of course, you could offset them with spending on, I like the example, like subsidized school lunches. One thing that we found when we were passing this bill through Congress was that we told everyone in the private sector who was losing tax benefits or getting taxed by an additional amount, we said, don't worry, you'll get it back through some spending later on. And for some reason, people didn't wholly trust us when we said that. So I think, again, the timing and the credibility of those promises is key. And I do think that when you're making policy in the abstract, these things that are easy, they become quite challenging to implement in practice. So in theory, it's easy. In practice, it's harder than we thought it would be.
Thank you so much. I have to ask the moderators, the organizers, for one more minute. I was negligent in my duty. I was supposed to call upon Botswana. Is Botswana here who wanted to make an intervention? I don't know where you are. Over there.
Good morning, everybody. I am from Botswana, specifically from the tax policy. It is my first ever encounter with this topic, gender equality specifically. So it was very interesting for me when I was invited to the meeting that I'm going to see the interaction between public finance and gender equality and also tax. So what I have learned so far is that indeed there's a place for integration between public finance, expenditure, tax, and indeed gender equality. I think as a woman, maybe the term gender equality sparks interest ordinarily and naturally. But what I have learned so far is that I think there's a challenge, especially at government level, because there's a lot of fragmentation in how we do our things. So having said here, I have learned that maybe it's important for all stakeholders to come together and rethink strategies for gender equality. Specifically, when I think of what we can do at tax policy level, I have learned that we need progressive tax systems. Yes, in Botswana, I can say our tax system is progressive, but I think there's a need to really look at what we have with gender equality in mind, because whatever we were doing, it was all about raising revenue and so on. But now there's a new kid in the block, very interesting, and I think gender equality is all about doing things right, and at the end of the day, to achieve efficiency. That's what I have learned here. It's not all that difficult in my view. You just have to look at your taxes, how you tax capital, how you tax consumption, and by, consumption taxes by nature are regressive. And now I have learned that the impact on women is even more. Last year we have exempted sanitary products for women, infant formula. We were not influenced by any gender issues, but now having sat here, I realized that it was one right step in the right direction. So we will be embarking on a project, UNDP project, that will deal with gender issues. So I think that will be an opportunity for Botswana, like I said, to relook at all our tax legislation, how we tax capital, consumption taxes, income tax, and to see where we have opportunities to improve things, to take into account gender equality. So I'm very, very happy to have had the opportunity to attend this first UNDP Global Dialogue on Public Finance and Tax for Gender Equality, and I think I've been empowered. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful closing intervention. I'm going to give the floor to Faria, and then I'll make one quick remark, and then we'll turn it over to Raquel.
I'm going to make a radical pitch for civil society. I think, as Thomas was saying, the search for resources, for tools, for best practices, civil society can be your partner in alleviating some of these capacity constraints. Our aim is the same, right? Like I said, we do want more revenue for better development. And civil society is a wide tent. The more technical arms can help you with data analyses, with reports. We've worked with FIRS in Nigeria on their tax expenditure reporting. The more grassroots mass mobilization ends, they can help you with data collection right at the grassroots for closing feedback loops. And we've heard from particularly ministries that sometimes working with mass mobilization groups, you can create political will from the bottom to get through some of these reforms that you need to undertake. So I really want to encourage the people in this room, look for those civil society partners in their country. They exist, some of them are our partners. So thank you for letting me make this intervention.
Thank you. Give a round. And my final word of closing is a bit provocative to our colleagues on going down the path of exempting certain items in consumption taxes. I think if you're going to go that route, it would be really important to do an incidence analysis to see, in fact, whether the revenue losses that you're incurring are going to benefit women in the procurement of those supplies and which women are benefiting. So for everybody, I think it's really important to do an incidence analysis. It is technical, but I think it's really important to check our own assumptions and actually look at who is benefiting and who is losing. And thank you for a wonderful panel. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.
So I am the lucky one announcing the break. So yeah, definitely now we go to have some coffee, continue doing your exchanges and having fun and establishing relationships. And at 11, we came back here again to continue working. Thank you so much. There is some announcement from Aroa.
Thank you, Raquel. Just want to ask kindly UNDP colleagues, calling UNDP colleagues from regional office and HQ, if you can come here for a moment. We will be preparing for the next session. We need your help. The rest, you can go for a coffee break. Need UNDP colleagues from HQ, from regions. I know there are more of you. Don't hide, please. Just last call, UNDP colleagues from HQ, UNDP colleagues from regions, please come. Thank you.
That's right. So
the question is, what are your overall impression and thoughts about the event?
Okay. I think it's been a really, really interesting event. We've had a lot of engagement with other participants here, and we've shared our experiences both on the table and on the podium as Nigeria, and it's been really good for us. It's very broad, covering a lot of topics, and things even that we hadn't thought about. So it's been great for us to learn about those. So that's been good. And also we've had key learning points that we've had to go back as a group and then discuss and think about what are we going to implement when we get back to Nigeria. So that's been really good for us.
Thank you. So, and the last question is, can you share any personal observation that highlight the intersection of financing and gender equality?
I think it's something we take for granted. We have not, a lot of times we don't go into the detail of what we're thinking about that linkage. But this session has given us time to think, reflect, and then identify where we have gaps. And so we do see that there are a lot of things that are linked that we have never really identified. But this Now we can see those linkages. So for example, you look at the woman in the market who has a child. She keeps the child with her in the market because she doesn't have enough money to pay for childcare. She pays rates, taxes, which her fellow, the man on the other end may not necessarily be paying. She looks after the child, he doesn't. She doesn't have a crèche where she could put the child. Yet she pays probably the same taxes, even if she earns less. So these are minor details like this that we hadn't really thought about. And then you start to think, so what could we have done for such a person? Could we have given her a lower rate? Could we have given, installed a crèche, for example, that she could put her child in so she could focus on the business and make as much as her male counterpart? So these are little details that we hadn't thought about to that point, but now we see the value of thinking about and drawing those connections. Very, very critical. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect.
It's on. Can you?
It's on.
Okay.
I will ask again the question.
Okay.
So, were there any specific speakers or presentation that left a lasting impression on you?
I was very impressed by most of the speakers. In fact, all of the speakers in this two-day event. I think the country presentations were excellent. It's really important to hear both the successes and opportunities that countries are accomplishing, but as well as their challenges. And I was particularly struck by the experiences of Rwanda and Colombia, two very different countries, but both doing very interesting reforms.
The last question, from your perspective, what challenges do you believe exist in integrating gender equality consideration into fiscal policies?
There are some challenges to integrate gender equality considerations in fiscal policy. I think the first thing is to understand that gender equality is not separate from fiscal policy, but really a key part of it. But the issue is not that you need to use tax policy for women. The issue is to actually use fiscal policy for the benefit of reducing gaps, for the closure of gaps between men and women. And there are some very good lessons from tax, for instance, on how you might do that. So a progressive tax system, for instance, is not gender specific, but it has huge benefits for gender equality. So that's the first, I was going to go on and on. That's the first issue. And a second issue is a more technical challenge in terms of the availability of data and a technical capacity to be able to use the data to inform fiscal policy reforms.
Thank you.
Hopefully this will be edited, so
Yes.
I think I'm more comfortable in Portuguese.
That's fine, that's fine. So, hold on, because I need to find the question again.
Do you think it's okay here, like my hair and?
Good. Okay, so 1 second. The first question was, this should be, are there specific aspects of the event that particularly resonated with you?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh my God, that just fluid. Yeah. I think this kind of event is very important for all of us, just to share opportunities and to share experiences. I think the particular aspect that resonates in me is like this possible interlinks between governments and civil societies, and how civil society might help government with data, with analysis, and with research. I think this is something that I will bring to Brazil and to use in my daily basis analysis and decision making, and how I can help the Brazilian Minister of Finance input gender and equality in his agenda.
Thank you. Last question. Could you suggest ways in which our international organization like the UNDP can collaborate with other entities to create a more significant impact in promoting gender equality in fiscal policies?
In my opinion, these international organizations has a very important role in leveraging agenda for countries, for low-income countries like Brazil. We are doing in Brazil now, currently in Brazil, we are discussing a very huge tax reform. And maybe, for example, the UNDP and other international organizations could leverage this issue there. We have in Brazil a conservative parliament, a conservative society, and sometimes issues like gender and equality are not on the table of people that are making huge decisions. So like bringing this agenda for countries like Brazil, I think will benefit society and benefit especially women. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. More time so you could really network, make new friends. So people are coming in. Thank you, Tom. So, what are we going to do now? People coming, coming, coming. Okay, so people are coming in. Please take your seats. We are a bit late on schedule, so really take the seats. Thank you very much. So, I thank you yesterday for being present. As we mentioned yesterday, this is a big investment that we're doing here, all of us, on time, on resources. So let's really make sure that we take the advantage of that. So I would appreciate if computers could be closed. We're going to be working now. I would need that if you could be present here at this time and place. Thank you very much. I'm seeing the last computers being closed. Thank you, the computers being closed. Thank you very much. So, this is what is going to happen now. But I would appreciate less people sitting. Don't we have the bell? Ding, 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 ding. Okay, I'm coming down. I would appreciate the computers closed, if we could start paying a little bit of attention. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm coming to look for you. Thank you. The last computer is closed. So, what is going to happen now? We are going to open for discussion, and we are really going to welcome you to a change. You are seeing the question here. No, this was a... Okay. So what is going to happen now is that we are going to continue learning from each other, thinking together, brainstorming together, thinking what we can do. So what we're going to be doing now is discussing in our own tables what you have been working on. Do you have any cases like the ones that we have been listening here? Do you have any interesting ongoing work? Are you already integrating some gender equality aspects on any reform you may be conducting, any work you may be conducting? Maybe are you thinking of the possibility of doing it? This is what we're going to be discussing. So what reforms we have now, thank you. What reforms we are conducting now, what entry points we are already doing, what we could consider doing it in the future, and what we're going to, we think that we could really start planning or doing something that we didn't think about before. So for this, we are going to be having UNDP colleagues who are going to be helping, taking some notes, making sure that all the richness of the discussion is well captured, so we can really make sure that we don't lose all this richness we have on this room. So for this, I would need to raise hands the tables that speak French, that are going to be having the discussion in French. Is there any table who is going to be having the discussion in French? Okay, one table over there, so one rapporteur, French rapporteur, if it could go there. A colleague from UNDP, and another one over there. Here, yes, I got it here, and I got it there. So UNDP colleagues, UNDP colleagues who speak French. We need one there, and one there. Then, who is going to be speaking in Portuguese? We have Portuguese table. Do you have UNDP colleague already can help with some note-taking? Excellent. Spanish, we got Spanish cover over there, the Spanish crew. There you go. Excellent. Russian. Russian, we got it. We got it over here. Brilliant. And we may need Arabic, right? We may need Arabic. Okay, we are covered, we are good. Okay. So as we discussed before, UNDP rapporteurs, can you please raise your hands? Can we make sure we have one rapporteur in each table? Okay. UNDP rapporteurs, maybe one of you could, maybe two of you could go to some other table. Excellent. Brilliant. Okay, so we are going to be having a plenary where we are going to be finding out what you discussed, what ideas you came up with. So I would need some indication that you know what you have to do. Do you know what you have to do? It doesn't seem so. I would appreciate if you know what you have to do, you'd say yes. Do you know what you have to do? I lost them. Okay, I'm going to explain it again. There you are. You can see the final questions there. Has your country taken any steps to advance gender equality within public finance? What actions can be taken in your country to advance gender equality reforms? You started? You started, okay. Excellent. What support you think you may need? Okay, I see everyone started. Just let me know, anyone does not know what they have to do? So I can go to the table. Good, good. Good, good. Okay.
But individualized. They give you the data with the taxpayer number, then it's the same, right? It's still better because it's down to you don't need to collect it. Yeah, no, you need to collect it, but I guess from the data side, you don't care about collection, you care about the analysis. Yeah. So I do know in some countries, yeah, they only transfer the bulk, and then you use a black box. But in others, you have to provide a report taxpayer by taxpayer with taxpayer identification number. Then you don't distinguish between those data and those that are based on target. Right. Yeah, but in some cases, if you're self-employed, something would have to be deducted, right? If you withholding tax or something like that. So there should be data it's still mentioned, and you can still study it. Yeah, those you cannot get at all. Yes. Right. Exactly, and then you look at the household survey and compare Well, that depends on whether they are child tax credits and how the country is organized, right? Yeah, but it definitely will not include any income that is not taxable, like subsistence income from subsistence farming or whatever. Probably, yeah. Everything's different in every country, right? Right. Certainly those countries where there is a local layer of taxation, they must have right. Yes. Or they need with the vehicle identification number. Yeah, which also not every country has. Yeah, but that's much more easy. Yeah. Yeah, but in the UK, that you talk about council tax, it's separate, right? But in some countries, there will be certain charge of income tax, or the income tax will be distributed. In that case, it's part of that return. Yeah. It's more yeah. Yeah, it's all that exactly. Like it's better than the cold medicine. Yes, that's why it's better than
c'est grâce au microcrédit. Donc, s'ils ont un crédit, ils ne peuvent pas se permettre d'aller pour l'administration fiscale, de les considérer comme contribuables. C'est très délicat. Encore précisément, s'il y a réforme, se revoir le secteur privé, déterminer le secteur privé.
La idea es que la encuesta se publica cada 5 años. Se utiliza la encuesta nacional, por supuesto, que se tiene la información de recaudación para hacer parte de la información de los datos. Y ese es tal vez el punto con respecto a la canasta básica. Ahora bien, si hay proyectos para mejorar algunas casas.
Budget process. Oh, on gender budget. So after the study, it was incorporated in the budget speech. So institutions next year, so early 2000s, 2005 or something, in the budget speech it was announced 10% earmarking Pero además yo creo que aquí el mensaje, estoy frente a mi mensaje para empezar, es que sabemos que no hay
kind of things. So Ministry of Finance, we are really keen on it. So everything will depend on the result of this assessment. Yes. Just see the bus. Yeah, they're gonna see there. But if the data and all the information,
Заранее прошу прощения. У нас есть проблема с тем, что мы очень много социальных программ, они не альтернативны. Денег социальных программ связаны с тем же самым детские сады, там,
So they moved from gender then there was transformation at some point was edge with was community development and gender itself. Then over time through the administration changes and now it's so the 10% is collected and
it's really hard to hear.
Solely responsible for the a lot of informal sector not really at the national level, they are at the sub-national levels, and these guys don't pay taxes. They don't pay taxes because at the federal level, what the federal revenue collects is just access around those of the foreign service and those
come to the attention of government through social. It gave us insight that we probably may not be looking at certain areas very well. There is also this issue that came up, which has to do with the school feeding program. The providers of the service asked, actually, payment for services, taxes were withheld, and the women were issues that so to sum up, I would say the workshop apart from
بس اللي دخلوا 10,000
condition exemption اول قاضي يعني اول 15
Nothing. Who does nothing? We spend our money. She has no right.
jointly. موضوع عندكم فاميلي بزنس هذه هي قضايا شائكه في كل العالم. كل واحد عنده فاميلي بزنس.
Sorry, Mom.
Levels kind of manage production. But we ensure that it's not again without any deductions and without any things. We just what it's
Okay.
So the first question is, how has your participation in events like this influenced or reinforced your personal commitment to gender equality?
Thank you. I have been working on the gender budgeting and applying a gender lens in public finance. So the outcome of this conference is, or the meeting is, how we can support or give the technical assistance to the countries which are beginning this process. So in that way, how can India help Maldives, India help Sri Lanka? So this is the way, the mutual understanding and the technical assistance can be provided to the other countries. Okay, I have to. Again? Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
This has been a very brilliant initiative. The first public finance and tax policy meeting, through a gentle lens. This is a brilliant initiative. One outcome of this is like the technical assistance, how we can provide to the countries which are beginning this process of applying a gentle lens in the public finance and to make this sustainable across globe. So those technical assistance, how the countries can share, mutually understand each other, is one of the brilliant outcomes of this meeting.
Thank you. And the second question is, how do you see that a focus on gender equality contributes to improvements in fiscal policies or tax systems?
Fiscal policy or tax systems are not gender neutral. So if you don't apply a gender lens to the public finance, that can turn gender blind. And gender blind policies, you need to have clear policies because men and women are asymmetrical in the socio-economic realm. So it's very relevant that we should apply a gender lens into the public finance. Otherwise, it will turn to, just gender blind. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
It was perfect. Thanks.
Colleagues, okay, we got the third one. So, colleagues, help me with this. We just need to, we have a participant here who is going to share their experience. Okay, I'm going there. Just 1 second. We're almost there. Okay, we have colleagues who are going to share. Thank you very much. Okay, the floor is yours.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. I'm not going to speak louder. There's a microphone. So somehow this became the South Asia table. We have India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. So we're going to start with the question, has your country taken steps to advance gender equality within public finance? And the answers from India are that they have started gender budget policy statement is in place, and they have institutionalized gender budgeting at the Ministry of Finance, and it's taking place at the provincial level with more than half of the provinces doing gender budgeting, and it's also been done at the third tier, which is the panchayat level and the municipal level, but only a few states are doing gender budgeting. In the Maldives, work on gender budgeting has commenced with several IFI supporting the Ministry of Finance on this activity. Maldives has also conducted a study on gender biases in tax policy, and the paper has been published in 2022, as I recall. And yeah, Maldives is also conducting a tax incidence analysis, which will contain gender disaggregated assessments on the income tax regime in Maldives, and also an upcoming assessment of how GST is impacting vulnerable groups, women, gender, and a lot of disaggregated assessments are also coming up. It's not an incidence analysis per se, but it's also in the works. And then another study on how the tax system can be reoriented to attract FDIs into the country, which is targeting priority areas like gender equality and climate change, is also in the works. In 2018, the taxes on sanitary products, feminine hygiene products, was also removed. In Sri Lanka, 3 bills are currently in Parliament with regard to gender equality, and it's with the Legal Draftsman's Office. The government has accepted at the policy, which the government has accepted at the policy level. The Gender Equality Bill, the Gender Budgeting Bill, Violence Against Women Bill is also being developed, right? So Sri Lanka is in the process of establishing a National Commission on Women, and I should have been speaking louder. I apologize. So Sri Lanka was one of the 5 countries where gender budgeting was piloted prior to 2000. In fact, Lekha confirmed that it was among the first 5 pilot countries, right, in the world. And due to a political regime change, gender budgeting is still, however, still in the process of maturing, right? So the main point for Sri Lanka in terms of gender budgeting is that the fiscal mandate is not working, and that the legal framework or mandate needed to be put in place to support further reforms. Right? Can someone take over? Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue from where Mifra stopped. That would be the second question, which is what actions can be taken in your country to advance fiscal reforms with a gender equality lens? Professor Lekha gave a very good suggestion, which is like on gender budgeting. It would be very important to track the countries in terms of the action taken in 4 stages of gender budgeting process. So the standard process has a first stage, which is the knowledge building stage. And this is a country-specific model. The second phase includes institutionalization, and in most countries, it's the Ministry of Finance that takes the ownership of the process. The third stage would be capacity building for all levels of government. And fourth and final stage is accountability mechanisms put in place. So when we look at these 4 stages, India is on track, but not all the states have reached the 4th phase yet. Now we move to Maldives. What are the things that Maldives can do in this space? Gender disaggregated tax data is one requirement. A communication strategy to ensure involvement of women in tax policy formulation process, which is currently slightly weak. An interesting idea came up, which is incorporating gender lens into the medium-term revenue strategy of the country, which I had not heard before. And then overall policy reform to support the public finance and gender reforms. And then lastly, subsidy reform. What we mean by this is removal of subsidies and diverting funds from that to vulnerable populations, including women. This is also something that Maldives would like to engage in. In Sri Lanka, we do not have sex disaggregated revenue data, so there is potential to explore gender disaggregated data collection through RAMIS. We understand we have to make a payment for it to RAMIS to do that, so we'll explore that. There's also potential to explore sex disaggregated tax incidence analysis. This is something we have not done before, so these are 2 useful things we can do going forward. And this brings me to the last question, which is what support do you think you may need? Maldives and Sri Lanka, we have 3 things in common that we need, which is technical assistance to analyze the data on tax incidents once collected. The next step would be building capacity to ensure that the officials have the skills to do the analysis. And then lastly, funding for implementation. And Sri Lanka has one additional need, which is that it would help if tax incidence analysis or gender budgeting or any of these reforms that we are talking about, if it's part of a prior action of the IMF to get our 3rd tranche or 4th tranche, it'll help push this reform through. Yes, it'll get the buy-in. And lastly, India, Technical Assistance for Gender Budgeting Act. The Act. That's all, over and out from my end. Signing off.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much. Amazing, fantastic. Indeed, the midterm planning, something very relevant that we didn't bring to the table yet. And everything that you referred to reminds me to what Karen was saying earlier, that we need to understand who we are benefiting, who if we are benefiting someone over another. So diagnosis, capacity development, excellent. Will be very, very much interested to see if this keeps moving and advancing. So we have our second winner of the day, who is going to be sharing with us what you have been discussing at the table. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll be discussing for Mauritius and Seychelles. So for the first question, has your country taken any steps to advance gender equality in the public finance system, public finance? So for Mauritius, so we do have a concept of gender-based budgeting. We have a dedicated ministry dealing with gender and women empowerment. So we have been, the country has been providing some tax incentive for female majority use products like sanitary pads, like in the other countries. We have some dedicated councils looking after this, like the National Women Council in Mauritius, National Women Entrepreneur Council. And we have recently got a gender equality bill, which has been voted. So the country is doing a lot. And yeah, we have also from the Mauritius Revenue Authority. So they have had policies to encourage women to join the labor force in terms of providing incentive for them, 3 years tax incentive. Now, concerning the second question, what actions have your country taken? What can be taken, sorry. So first of all, the team here believe that it's important to have a comprehensive analysis to understand the real picture, the financial system as at date. For this, it's important to have an appropriate data collection and analysis system. And yeah, for us to be able to implement a real, a genuine gender responsive budgeting. And another aspect which is very important is to have more women in active participation in the budgetary process and to incorporate the concept of gender mainstreaming at all levels, because it's not very high in Mauritius. And there's a need for policy reforms to address structural barriers to gender equality within the public finance system. And yeah, and now the third part, what support do you think you need? So we have been discussing about, so the first thing very important is capacity building for public officials. Second is technical assistance, which could be provided by institutions like the UNDP, very important. And also there's a need to create that awareness on these issues to get the political buy-in. Thank you. So my colleague will continue for Seychelles.
Hi everybody. I'll keep it brief because the context of Seychelles is quite similar to that of Mauritius. So in Seychelles, we've got very strong enabling policy that, for example, with access to free education and healthcare, and even some sanitary products are VAT exempted. And we even have subsidized childcare to enable women to participate actively in formal employment. And so these are some measures that have been very successful in ensuring that women are active in the labor force. And then another area where the Seychelles Revenue Commission has been very proactive is in the collection of gender disaggregated data. And this is something fairly new that will take effect as of January of this year. So they are trying to attempt to collect this data through the payroll and also taxpayer registration forms. And so once this data will be collected, the idea in terms of support that will be needed is to proceed with data analysis to better understand what the current trends are in the country and where the policy gaps are, right, to address gender equality. And there is also perhaps a need to identify areas where there may be implicit bias, as this is something that we have not necessarily given much thought too. And of course, after the gaps are identified, then it'll be a matter of, pushing for capacity building to raise more awareness and create a better understanding of these issues, and maybe see how we can also incorporate GRB, into the budgeting process. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Opa. Thank you so much. And I see that Mauritius, Seychelles, they're sharing some similar thoughts that Sri Lanka and colleagues at the table mentioned. So we can hear. So you have been thinking on how to help reform different taxes, how to build on what is already there, but try to identify what existing biases there are there. So building understanding. Well, they were talking about also building the understanding on the fiscal incidents, looking at how we do budgeting and how we plan on budgeting. So I can see this integrated thinking on public finance. We didn't talk about that, but I think it's fine. But we see common challenges, right? We need to develop capacities. We need data. So we already starting to see, okay, where will we need to start from? So we have the third winner of the day who is going to share with us what they discussed on the table. So over to you.
So I will present the case of Zimbabwe. And for those who get the joke, we finally agreed that the Victoria Falls is in Zambia, not Zimbabwe. So firstly, in terms of the supreme law of the land, Article 17 and 56 do recognize gender equality and broadly speak to the promotion of women issues. Article 298, Part A and Part B specifically talk about the principles of public finance management, and inclusive therein is a burden of taxation being shared fairly, and also resources being used for the development and prioritization of marginalized communities. When we go to specific law, we noted that the Income Tax Act abolished joint filing, which seemed quite regressive. For the VAT Act, there's an exemption on the importation of sanitary ware, and this is also complemented by the exemption of customs duty on sanitary ware. From the labor perspective, 90 days maternity leave are given for women who are expecting, and half days labor is also awarded 6 months, up to 6 months after birth. We noted that there's a systematic change in the policy system governing public finance management that's coming up in Zimbabwe. That also counts as something that has been done. Narrowing down to budgeting issues, currently Zimbabwe is utilizing a gender-based budgeting methodology, which was introduced in 2007, and all ministries are requested to report as to what resources are being allocated towards gender issues. There's a system of use of indicators per ministry speaking to gender, and we noted from the 2024 national budget that 31 out of 38 ministries, departments, and aligned authorities had reported on gender. In terms of the key things that need to be done is, firstly, there are missing important indicators that need to be added to what is being reported per ministry. The second one is there needs to be an assessment and monitoring of the impact of the indicators. There's an issue of budget credibility. So budgeting is one thing, but spending the money that you said you've budgeted for is another thing. And because of aspects of macroeconomic pressure, high inflation, we have noted that there's little budget credibility, and this is something that needs to be worked on. In terms of actions that need to be done concretely, firstly is the aspect of capacity building. So there are so many indicators, there's so much data that's coming out, but there needs to be capacity building and skills that people in gender units should understand finance, and people in finance units should understand gender. And lastly, I talked about the provisions of VAT exemptions and customs duties exemptions on sanitary towels. What we recommend is a need for tax incidence analysis to understand if this is actually working. Currently, this is being complemented by the provision of sanitary ware by the government for free, so we need to have an incidence analysis to know what exactly is working. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And actually also continue seeing some connections on what Zambia is mentioning about, okay, we have these exemptions, these measures on sanitary products, but we need to understand the impact. So again, understanding, doing impact analysis. Also mentioned the pressures on the fiscal space that many of us many countries that are sitting here are experiencing. And so with the servicing the debt and how in this context, macroeconomic pressures, we can really continue advancing gender equality. Also would like to acknowledge all the ongoing good work that is being reporting so far. So actually there is efforts, there are things already in place. We are not starting from scratch. There is a lot of things in place. We are starting to see commonalities on what we need to make it happen. So just also want to mention that this is not where this conversation is going to stop, because we are going to resume this thinking and brainstorming tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be a very practical day where we will bring all that we have been discussing during yesterday and today. And tomorrow we will try to bring it a little bit more concrete. So what concrete actions based on all this brainstorming, fantastic, amazing brainstorming we have been doing together, what concrete things we can actually start thinking to do in our own countries that would really be able to be implemented. So I don't want to stop this fantastic brainstorming. We will be closing for lunch, but first I would like to know if anyone would like to complement. So I think that we could take, not full reporting, but if we could take some things that haven't been mentioned yet. I see hand there. Second hand. Okay. If you can go, please.
Okay, thank you, Arwa. I'm Sharmin. I work with UNDP Bangladesh. So what I wanted to add, we also in this table discussed about what are the progressive policies that we have and what needs to be done. But I would like to add one more thing that actually we haven't discussed a lot, which is that the discriminatory social norms and practices and how this budget, I mean, we are talking about tax, like one is income and another is expenditure, but then while also planning the expenditure, for example, in Bangladesh, we have 44 ministries who are actually doing the gender responsive planning and budgeting, etc. And also within our total, I mean, if we look at the last fiscal year, our more than 34% budget allocation has been planned in a way, in a gender responsive manner. But the problem is, sometimes we see that there is a huge pushback from the people in the country and also from different groups of people, for example, the religious extremist groups. So the government is coming up with many, progressive policies, but then we also struggle that whenever they are coming up with good policies, and then there is a pushback from different groups. So I think also when we are talking about expenditure, then, for example, within the 44 ministries, there is Ministry of Women and Children Affairs. They can also think of how to engage men and boys. They can also think of how to address all those social norms and practices that actually wash away all the the advancement that we are gradually making. So I think that's the one thing that I wanted to mark. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Sharmin and colleagues from Bangladesh. Actually, one colleague before also mentioned political will. So this is something that we need definitely. Thank you for sharing this reflection. Definitely, I agree we need to be prepared, understand what are the bottlenecks, and one of them is the backlashes, the resistances. Again, how can we overcome them? Is it engaging civil society? Is it having more policy dialogues? Is it really talking to those to these social groups? Definitely, we started yesterday discussing how we come from different positions, we come from different points of view. The important part, we don't need to agree on everything, but the important part is to get consensus on the basics to make it happen. So definitely. We had a second hand over there. Latin American representation, please.
Hello, colleagues. We had quite an interesting conversation here in Latin America and the Caribbean. A lot of important examples that have been mentioned already. Costa Rica, for example, they had feminine menstrual hygiene transformation via first decree and then law. But the interesting part of it is that started from the bottom, right? Bottom up with the women's movement, but also a technical, solid transformation from the ministry and the tax authorities that allowed to create really fast moving forward transformation of the law, not from an ordinary law, but also the transformation of the basic family basket law, in which there was an inclusion of products like not only women's hygiene products, but products related with care economy, right? Like diapers for elders, diapers for babies, etc., that actually motivated that consideration from a gender perspective. There is also a specific project to standardize the VAT rates. Currently they have 17 rates, and they're going to create 4 new categories, but from this perspective, including a gender vision there. There's also quite an interesting talking about challenges when this inclusion of products within the family basket was done. We were discussing if there were backlashes or movements from the private sector, and the minister just mentioned they have a quite important relationship with the private sector that also helped kind of with the IPG initiative, with the gender equality seal, helped move this political agenda and absorb a little bit those processes or resistances that could have existed. Also, Brazil, historical moment in the approval of tax reform 2023. We also have Honduras in the process of a tax reform, and with the same inclusion of deduction in menstrual hygiene products, but from a perspective of benefit from a woman rather than from the perspective of rights. That's one of the discussions that we have to still strengthen from that in the political arena. Consumer reforms that was regulated by the federal and national governments. They have an important context of selective taxes that we're implementing in everything that harms health and harms the environment, but then how to include women's health as part of the political discourse also is being generated in the agenda and the common discourse. And I think one of the elements that has been drawn into the conversation is how can we actually, like, where are these resources coming from consumption taxes, which Brazil has one of the most complex, according to our CIET colleague, one of the most complex regimes of consumption taxes in Latin America, because they have internal transit taxes, etc. How can this be addressed from a gender perspective, and how can we actually look into other legal landscapes, like the fiscal landscape, in which we're seeing that mostly women, in some cases in which men are the owners of those financial assets, they are not being charged by these tax structures, while women are the owners of these financial assets, they are being charged. And that just one tiny last thing that it was quite interesting is there are elements that are being, there are taxes that are being placed into weapons or into specific alcohol, etc. And these resources are being used to prevent or to repair victims of violence, to repair gender-based violence. But are we stimulating or are we actually generating perverse incentives there? And how are we tying up the government's responsibility of repair of those victims by some taxes that are hopefully not going to be there in the midterm or long run because we want to disincentivize those actions and activities?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Latin America, and thank you for this thought-provoking reflection. What impacts are we having on how we design our taxes, and are we having the desired impact or not, like the one that you just mentioned on GBV? So we are closing for lunch. I hope you are hungry. And lunch is going to be on the same place on the first floor. We are going to be back here at 1:45. 1:45. Does it sound good? We have this afternoon, it's our last session in plenary. We are going to miss each other, but tomorrow we are not going to be that far away. Tomorrow we'll still, all of us will on this fourth floor. But this afternoon is the last time that we are all of us in plenary. And we are going to continue discussing how we can conduct reforms. This afternoon is going to be about thinking of our own institutions. So how can we get our ministries of finance fit for purpose? How can we get our tax authorities fit for purpose? What do we need in our institutions to advance this gender equality lens that we are discussing here? So having said that, thank you everyone for your fantastic participation. We gathered and we documented all these amazing examples. Tomorrow we will be able to listen more about them. I hope you enjoy your lunch.
Question 1, what are your overall thoughts? Oh no, sorry, I read the wrong one. What are your overall impression and thoughts about the event?
So this is an extremely exciting event and at an extremely important time. We are seeing that gender equality is not progressing at the speed we would like to see. And at the same time, we're seeing that public financial management reforms are stalling in a very fiscally constrained context. This conference is bringing together gender equality expertise, budget expertise, tax expertise, and trying to work through how we can work together to accelerate both gender equality and public finance reform.
Great. Love the energy. Second question, how do you see UNDP role in helping advance gender equality within the context of fiscal policies?
UNDP is a development institution trying to bring development outcomes to be a focus of public finance. UNDP's role in this space is not the same as a financial institution. A development institution like UNDP needs to work with financial institutions and broker unlikely partnerships that can unlock reform and change. Our role in this conference shows that, bringing together these unlikely partners who work on gender equality or who work on tax reform together in a way that can really build a platform for gender equality and sustainable development.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. What
and
fun.
We should use the second one